In the shattered remains of old world cities, Halloween somehow survived. It wasn't the costume parties or the candy that kept it alive. Those were relics of a time when people had luxuries like candy, not ration packs made of bug paste. And it definitely helped that mutated pumpkins seemed to be one of the few crops that thrived in the wasteland, reaching enormous sizes. They were edible, but most had come to hate the orange gourds. No, in the post-apocalypse, Halloween was about proving which gang was the toughest, the most brutal, the most willing to go all out. For two rival raider groups, the Skull Bashers and the Rust Fiends, that meant one thing: trick or treat. Emphasis on the tricks. But these weren't the simple tricks of doorbell pranks or harmless scares. No, this was a blood-soaked game of one-upmanship, where the tricks were lethal, and the treats, well, sometimes they were the unlucky fools who got caught in the middle. Every Halloween, the Skull Bashers and Rust Fiends met in the ruins of old suburban streets, the cracked asphalt lined with burnt-out homes and rusted cars. Each gang would wear their grungiest, most terrifying war gear: spiked helmets, shoulder pads made of scavenged bones, neon-painted chainsaws, and then they'd face off. The first group to get the upper hand would usually start the tricks, and the other group would respond with a treat, escalating the chaos until one side was decimated or ran screaming back into the wasteland. Last year, the Rust Fiends had rigged a rusted-out RV with explosives and sent it careening into the Skull Bashers' camp. The Skull Bashers responded by baiting the Rust Fiends into a minefield, then popping out of the ground in ghillie suits made of car parts, screaming bloody murder. This year, it was personal. Scorn, the leader of the Skull Bashers, a hulking brute of a man with a mohawk sharp enough to cut metal, stood on top of a gutted school bus, surveying the ruins of the street. His raiders, armed with makeshift weapons and plenty of bad attitude, were riled up, ready to strike.
"We got to top last year's minefield surprise,"
Scorn snarled, pacing.
"Rust Fiends think they're clever. This year, we show them what clever really is."
From behind him, Twitch, the gang's unhinged mechanic, cackled. "I rigged up something special, boss. Something that'll blow their minds. Literally." Scorn grinned, his gold teeth glinting in the pale sun.
"What you got?"
Twitch unveiled his creation, a battered jack-o'-lantern wired with grenades. "Trick or treat, Rust Fiends!" Scorn's laughter boomed across the wasteland. Meanwhile, across the dead neighborhood, the Rust Fiends were preparing their own brand of carnage. Their leader, Gutter, a wiry man with too many scars and not enough teeth, spat a wad of tobacco and barked orders.
"We ain't losing this year. I don't care what kind of dirty tricks those Skull Bashers try. This time, we've got the best treat of all."
He gestured toward a cage where a captured Skull Basher was tied up, looking worse for wear.
"This here's our secret weapon. When they come looking for trouble, we'll release this sucker with a collar of explosives. They'll never see it coming."
The Rust Fiends cheered, and Gutter grinned.
"Let's make him scream."
As the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a sickly orange, both gangs crept toward the center of the street. The air was thick with tension, and the usual sounds of the wasteland, howling winds, distant gunfire, seemed to hush in anticipation. The Skull Bashers approached from the west, armed to the teeth and dragging a cart filled with Twitch's explosive pumpkins. From the east, the Rust Fiends rolled up in a cobbled-together truck, the captured Skull Basher strapped to the hood like a grotesque hood ornament. Scorn grinned when he saw the captive.
"Looks like they brought us a present."
Gutter cackled from his truck, revving the engine.
"Happy Halloween, Skull Bashers! Time to collect your treat!"
With a signal, both gangs launched into action. The Skull Bashers had rigged up catapults and hurled the grenade pumpkins toward the Rust Fiends, who dodged just in time. They exploded in a shower of shrapnel and orange goo, splattering the walls of the nearest ruins. The Rust Fiends retaliated by releasing their captive, who staggered forward, collar blinking red, screaming about bombs. But just as he reached the Skull Bashers, Twitch hit a switch, and the ground beneath the Rust Fiends exploded. Another minefield, more cleverly hidden than the year before. Rust Fiends were thrown into the air like ragdolls, limbs flailing as chunks of debris rained down. Gutter barely had time to curse before his truck flipped over, landing in a heap of scrap metal and fire. The chaos didn't stop there. Twitch, always with an eye for the dramatic, had rigged the entire street with Halloween-themed booby traps. Bouncing betties shaped like candy corn erupted from the ground. Tripwires triggered flaming skulls to roll down from the hills. In the distance, a Skullbasher sniper dressed as a ghoul picked off Rust Fiends one by one. But the Rust Fiends weren't done yet. Gutter, bloodied but not broken, climbed out of the wreckage and unleashed their final treat, a mutated war beast. It was a grotesque thing, a mishmash of scavenged biotech and twisted flesh, roaring as it charged the Skullbashers. Scorn faced it head-on, wielding his signature weapon, a chainsaw with barbed wire wrapped around the blade.
"Trick-or-treat, ugly,"
he growled before revving it to life. The street became a battlefield of blood and terror, the gangs tearing into each other like rabid dogs. Explosions lit up the night, and screams echoed for miles. By the time the sun rose over the wasteland, only one gang remained. Scorn stood amidst the rubble, bloodied but victorious, his chainsaw dripping. Around him, the few surviving Skullbashers cheered weakly, their armor dented and their faces smeared with grime. Gutter and the Rust Fiends were no more, their bodies scattered across the street like broken toys. Scorn wiped his brow and looked at his men.
"Next year," he said, "we're gonna need bigger pumpkins."
Halloween, after all, was still a thing in the wasteland. Thanks for joining me at Tales from the Post-Apocalypse. This is the month of October, so it's a good time for Halloween spooky stories and fun stuff. So I'm going to try and put up as many Halloween-related post-apocalyptic horror stories as I can come up with. Please like and subscribe and share around if you enjoy this sort of thing. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.